The girl behind the register could not have been more than 19, and she was about to lose her job for something I had watched not happen. I was third in line at the pharmacy counter when the manager came striding over, a man with a lanyard and an audience he did not deserve. He said, loudly, "The drawer is $40 short. You were the only one on it. I am going to need you to come to the office." The girl went white. She said she did not take anything. He talked over her. I had been standing there for 10 minutes. I had watched the whole shift, and I knew exactly where the $40 had gone, because I noticed things. I have noticed things my whole life. I stepped forward. I said, "Excuse me, before you take that young woman anywhere, I think you should know that I have been standing here for 10 minutes, and I can tell you precisely what happened to your $40. And it was not her. The manager turned, with the face of a man not used to being interrupted by a woman my age. I said, "You are about to make a serious mistake in front of a great many people. I would slow down if I were you. My name is Eleanor Brooks, 63 years old, Connecticut, retired teacher, widow. This story is a little different from the ones I usually tell you because this time the person in trouble was not me and was not my family. She was a stranger, a 19-year-old girl behind a pharmacy counter whose name I did not even know yet. But I have to tell you why I was able to help her, and it goes back to the thing that has defined my whole life, which is that I notice things. I was a teacher for 22 years. You cannot stand in front of 30 teenagers 5 times a day for 22 years without becoming a person who notices everything, who is about to cry, who did not eat breakfast, who is lying about the homework and who is telling the truth, who took the missing pencil and who is being blamed for it. Noticing is not a talent. It is a muscle, and I built mine over 2 decades until it never quite shuts off. So when I go to the pharmacy, I do not stare at my phone like everyone else. I watch. I cannot help it. I watch the people and the small dramas of an ordinary afternoon, the way some people do crosswords. That particular Tuesday, I had been waiting at the pharmacy counter for about 10 minutes because the line was slow and the young woman at the register was doing 3 jobs at once, the way young employees always are now. I had watched her the whole time, and in those 10 minutes, I had seen something that, at the time, meant nothing to me. It was only a small, ordinary thing, but I noticed it, and I filed it away because that is simply what I do. Here is what I saw. About 6 minutes before the manager came striding over, an older customer ahead of me had paid for a prescription in cash. The young woman made change, but the customer was flustered, juggling a cane and a purse and a phone, and when the young woman counted the change back, the customer waved it away, distracted, and a folded bill, 2 20s together, fluttered down off the counter and onto the floor on the customer's side, where it slid under the edge of a display rack. The customer did not notice. The young woman did not notice. Neither of them saw it fall. The customer left. The $40 sat on the floor under the rack, 6 feet from the register. It was such a small thing that I almost said something at the time, and then the line moved and I did not, and I forgot about it. Until the manager came over and announced, loudly, in front of everyone, that the drawer was $40 short and that the young woman was the only one who had been on it, and that he needed her to come to the office. $40 short, 2 20s, on the floor, under the rack, where I had watched them fall. The young woman was going white, stammering that she had not taken anything, and the manager was talking over her with the bored certainty of a man who had already decided, and I realized that I was the only person in that pharmacy who knew that an innocent girl was about to be marched into an office and probably fired and possibly accused of theft for $40 that were lying on the floor 6 feet away. I had a choice. I could mind my own business the way most people do, or I could be the person I have spent 63 years becoming. If you have ever been the only one who saw what really happened and had to decide whether to speak, stay with me, because what I did next took about 90 seconds, and it changed that young woman's whole week. Subscribe and hit the bell. I post every day. I stepped forward out of the line. I did not raise my voice. I never do. But I have a voice I used in classrooms for 22 years, the one that is quiet and certain and somehow carries to the back of the room, and I used it now. I said, "Excuse me, I would like to say something before this goes any further." The manager turned. His lanyard said his name was Brandon, and he had the particular impatience of a young man who has just been given enough authority to be dangerous with it. He said, "Ma'am, this is an internal matter. If you could just wait." I said, "It is about your $40, so I do not think it is only internal. I have information you do not have, and you are about to make a decision without it, which is the worst way to make a decision." That stopped him. People are not used to being told, calmly, that they are about to be wrong. I said, "I have been standing in this line for about 10 minutes. I notice things. It is a habit from a long career. And about 6 minutes ago, I watched the customer who was here before me, an older gentleman with a cane, pay in cash. This young woman counted his change back to him correctly. I watched her do it. But he was flustered, and he waved the change away, and 2 $20 bills, folded together, fell off the counter onto the floor on his side and slid under the edge of that display rack right there. I pointed. I said, "Neither of them saw it fall. He left without it. She never had it. Your drawer is not short because anyone took anything. It is short because $40 is on your floor, under that rack, and has been for 6 minutes." The whole line was listening now. The young woman was staring at me like I had appeared out of the air. Brandon's certainty wobbled. But he had committed, in front of people, and a certain kind of man would rather be wrong loudly than corrected quietly. He said, "Ma'am, I appreciate that, but the count is the count. I cannot just take—" I said, "Then do not take my word for it. Look, it will take you 10 seconds. Walk over to that rack and look underneath it. If I am wrong, I will apologize to you in front of everyone, and you can carry on. If I am right, you owe this young woman an apology in front of the same people who just watched you accuse her. That seems fair to me. Does it not seem fair to you?" There is a particular trap in calm fairness. It does not give the other person anything to push against. He could not argue with looking. Looking costs nothing, and if he refused to look, then everyone in that line would know he cared more about being right than about the truth. So, Brandon walked over to the rack. Stiffly, annoyed. Certain I was a meddling old woman. He crouched down. He reached under the edge of the display rack, and he came up with 2 $20 bills, folded together, exactly where I said they would be. The pharmacy was very quiet. I want to tell you what was on the young woman's face in that moment, because it is the reason I will never regret stepping out of that line. It was not just relief. It was the particular shock of a young person discovering that a stranger had been paying enough attention to save her. That someone had seen. That she was not as alone and as powerless as she had felt 30 seconds earlier. I know that look. I spent 22 years putting that look on teenagers' faces. The look that says, someone noticed and someone cared enough to act. Brandon stood there holding his $40, red to the ears. To his credit, and I will give him this, he did not try to wriggle out of it. He turned to the young woman in front of the line and he said, "Maria, I am sorry. I should not have done that the way I did. I jumped to a conclusion and I was wrong." It was not a perfect apology, but it was a real one, said in the same place as the accusation, which is the only place an apology counts. I had said almost those exact words to a bank, and a waiter, and a man at my own front door. "Apologize were you accused." He did. I gave him credit for it. Maria. Her name was Maria. 19 years old, and she had been about 10 seconds from being walked into an office and possibly fired for $40 that were on the floor. If this moment reached something in you, if you have ever been the one person who saw the truth and decided to say it out loud, leave me a comment. Tell me what you saw. Tell me if you spoke. I read every single one. I got my own prescription, and I was putting it in my bag to leave when Maria came around the end of the counter to find me. She was still a little shaky. She said, "I do not know how to thank you. He was going to fire me. I have been here 4 months. I needed this job. I do not even know why you said anything. You did not have to." I said, "What is your name, dear?" She said, "Maria." I said, "Maria, sit down with me for 1 minute if you have a moment on your break. I want to tell you something, and then I will leave you alone." We sat on the little bench by the pharmacy window. I said something because I was the only one who saw, and when you are the only one who saw, you have a responsibility. Not a choice, a responsibility. Most people convince themselves it is not their business. But the truth is everyone's business, especially when someone without power is about to be crushed by someone with a little. I said, "But I want to tell you the more useful thing, because I will not always be standing in your line." She listened. She had the good kind of listening, the kind I always hoped for in a classroom. I said, "Today you stood there and stammered that you did not do it, and you had no way to prove it, and that is the most frightening feeling there is. So here is what my husband taught me, and what I am giving to you. When you work a register, at the end of every shift, you write down your count, and you have someone initial it. When something feels off, you say, out loud, in front of a witness, 'Can we count this drawer together right now?' You create a record. You create a witness. You make it so that the next time a Brandon comes striding over, you are not a frightened girl with no proof. You are a careful young woman with a paper trail." I said, "I am 63 years old, and the single most powerful thing I have ever owned is not money or strength. It is the habit of keeping records and noticing things. It has protected me my entire life. I am giving it to you, 40 years early. Use it." Maria was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "You sound like a teacher." I laughed. I said, 22 years, it never washes off." She said, "I wish I had had you." I said, "You have me for the next minute, make it count. And then go be careful and go be kind, and someday, when you are old, be the one who steps out of the line. There are not enough of us." I called Patricia from the car. I told her the whole thing. The drawer, the rack, the $40, Maria. Patricia was quiet, and then she said, "You know, Eleanor, most of your stories are about protecting yourself. This is the first one in a while that was about a complete stranger." I said, "It is the same muscle, Patricia, noticing. Whether it is my dog, or my mother's house, or a forged lease, or $40 under a rack. You spend a lifetime learning to see clearly, and then the only honest thing to do with that skill is to use it for whoever is in front of you, even a girl whose name you do not know yet." She said, "Richard would have liked her." I said, "Richard would have hired her on the spot and taught her to keep a ledger." Patricia laughed. She said, "Yes, he would have." It is a month later. I go to that pharmacy on purpose now, even though it is not the closest one. Maria is still there. She waves when she sees me. She told me last week that she keeps a little notebook now, in her apron pocket, and that she counts her drawer at the end of every shift and has a coworker initial it. She said, "Nobody is ever going to be able to do that to me again." I told her that was the entire point. Brandon is still the manager, but something shifted in him that day, I think, the way it sometimes does in a young person who gets caught being unfair in public and chooses to own it instead of dig in. He is gentler now, from what Maria tells me, a little slower to accuse. Sometimes that is all it takes. One pair of eyes in the line, willing to speak. I think about that afternoon often. How close she came. 19 years old, 4 months into a job she needed, about to be branded a thief for $40 on a floor. And how the only thing that saved her was that an old woman in the line had spent her whole life refusing to stop paying attention. People think noticing is a small thing, a quiet thing, a thing that fades with age. It is the opposite. It is the most powerful thing I own. And the older I get, the more I understand that the whole point of seeing clearly is so that you can step out of the line, at the right moment, for someone who cannot speak for themselves. That is not a small life. That is the whole of it. So pay attention to the people in front of you, not just the screen in your hand. And when you are the only one who saw, be brave enough to say so. Someone's whole week may be sitting on a floor, under a rack, waiting for the one person who noticed. Leave me a comment and tell me where you are watching from. Have you ever spoken up for a stranger? or wished someone had spoken up for you? Tell me about it. I read every single one. And if this story reached something in you today, subscribe, because tomorrow's story will stay with you too.